Zach, what's going on across the freight markets today?
Right on. So I've got the Outbound Tinder Rejection Index for Denver pulled up here. This has been one of the craziest markets in the United States here over the past year, really. And Denver traditionally, Kaylee, is not a market that carriers really like to go into. It's the terrain,
Snowy, mountains, Denver.
I mean, it sounds great to visit, but it's not great in terms of hauling freight. You got a big 53-foot trailer, heavy, 80,000-pound vehicle running through the mountains.
Tight mountain passes, not a good place to
And
be.
it's not just that, it's that there's not that much freight generally in that area. You have to traverse a large amount of low population density areas that just don't have a lot of production value. I mean, it's a lot of aggregate mining, derivatives thereof, and it just does not produce enough freight, but there's a lot of consumption. Traditionally. However, things have been changing here over the last year to 2 years or so. The population boom brought a lot of new industry to the area, and we've seen this extremely rocky ride, pun intended, of the Tinder rejection rate in the Denver market. So looking at the blue line here, you can see this thing looks just like the Rocky Mountains. It has been up and down, up and down. You see the trend lines are generally in line with the rest of the market, coming up here through November, December, but it is just so volatile in this area here as carriers kind of come in and go out, et cetera. Very difficult to schedule and plan your network capacity around these fluctuations. So you're bouncing between 30, 40% Tinder rejection rate, extremely high. It is starting to kind of level out here. You can see in the last month or so, Tinder rejection rates not necessarily as high as they've been, 35%, et cetera, coming out of this, the April. And then it kind of levels off here in May and, going into this, what's less volatile time of year for this market because the weather does tend to settle down. Although Nick Austin did talk about the 2 inches of snow that they got just the other day. So looking at this market here, we're seeing Tinder rejection rates starting to come back up closer to 30%. This is definitely, a market that if you're a carrier, you need to pay attention to the day-to-day swings to notice when you're going to have increasing spot market.
Clearly, there's no really big trend to this other than just, it's hot just like the rest of the market.
Yeah, everything's hot right now. Everything's hot, except that it's all relative in terms of when you're going to be able to find, more spot market activity, increasing spot market rates, et cetera. So the Outbound Tinder Volume Index is actually, you can see here, this is kind of our measure of demand in general. So the Outbound Tinder Volume Index, very flat in general. And this is the National Tinder Volume Index here in blue. You can see that we have been in this kind of this steady holding pattern for the last, probably since this, winter weather event there in the middle of February. And then over the top of that, you have our Tinder rejection rate. You can see the Tinder rejection rate, though, coming down. It's trending lower as we speak, not tremendously. We're still at 24%, 1 out of every 4 loads, still getting rejected at this point in time. And if we go out to the map, we can see, just what I'm talking about in terms of where the market action is. This is our weighted rejection index. You see me pull this thing up just about every day. And that is because we're trying to figure out just exactly where the short-term, week-over-week changes are in the overall market. Atlanta, we talked about it yesterday, still one of the most significant increases week-over-week. When you combine volumes and Tinder rejection rates, in that weekly change.
Why are we seeing that?
So we think this is largely due to the fact that we have a lot of activity in the Savannah port. Savannah port has been, very active over the last 2 months. A lot of freight coming into these areas, and it just doesn't hop onto a truck. It's one of those things that it takes a little bit of time. All this import activity, it gets onto a rail, it gets into a warehouse, and then it'll sit there until it's time for it to ship it. This time of year, we typically, are starting to transition into where shippers are trying to get a lot of freight out into the market a little bit more. In the winter, they're kind of like building back their inventory. They're restocking. And that's kind of been the big term.
Now it's time to go.
Yeah. Now it's like the summer. Everybody's starting to get active again. The pandemic's easing. They're trying to get this stuff back into some of these DCs and warehouses across the country. So, and of course, the overriding theme has been these shippers just can't get this freight into the country. So a lot of that freight that was going out west, you see that big red out there in the Ontario market. It's softening. And we were talking about this with Vincent yesterday, how the carriers, once they know that there's a ton of freight in Los Angeles, they're going to go out there to get it. And that's easing the Los Angeles capacity situation. So that is rapidly loosening. And of course, Atlanta is feeling the brunt of it because they're all going out west now. Denver is getting bypassed.
If I was Denver, I'd be bypassed too.
Yeah, because a lot of that corridor right there, carriers will go down to the south part of that, and it's, they don't necessarily want to stop in Denver to get to wherever they're going, because a lot of that freight is going to be regional, not necessarily going Los Angeles, an easy lane for carriers to cover. So if you do have a lot of Los Angeles freight, that's probably one of the only lanes that you're going to have a lot of capacity available regularly.
Which is good because it's kind of finally taking the stress off of that Southern California area, right? That's been under so much stress really since stuff has just been sitting there the last couple months.
Exactly. So Denver, of course, going anywhere else probably really hard to get capacity at this point. But going out west, everybody's trying to get there anyway. If you're a shipper in the Denver market going to Los Angeles, do not take a rate increase.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it.